All right, I believe we're live. I believe. Is my camera working okay? Hello? I think we're live. All right, very good. Hey, Garrick, can you hear me okay? For a minute, it didn't look like my camera was going to work, but I think we're good to go. I'm going to share this in the chat real quick. I got kind of a late start. I wasn't able to share it earlier. You're it? That's okay. That's all right. We'll give it just a second. Today we're having a follow-up conversation about the lecture episode this morning. What does it really mean to be a game master? This was the topic, and we've got some really good conversation going on about this in the Discord. And we're also going to gather the wisdom of the chat here, hopefully. Let me just give it just one more minute. Make sure that people can see that we're rolling. Ryan says lecture was beautiful, just finished it. I'm glad. I was a little worried that that format was going to be boring. I was actually high-key concerned about that. Enough so that I changed the format a little bit for tomorrow mornings. Maybe I'll change it back if enough people liked it, but I was just a little afraid it was going to be boring. Garrick says the Klingons almost had it right. It is a good day to dice. That is almost right. Robert Evans is here. Superfly Rob. How's it going, Rob? I hope you're doing well as well. I'm doing great. Dave Imaginations is here. How's it going, Dave? Good to see you. All right, we'll give it just 1 or 2 more minutes before we jump into this and I start reading these other conversations. But yeah, Robert says part 1 is good. Good. I'm glad. Yeah, you'll have to compare tomorrow's with it and let me know which one you prefer better. I was actually thinking this is going to be too boring. I'm going to need to liven it up a little bit more. And so I did today, like for tomorrow's episode. So we'll see how it goes. Kelf says, howdy. Would love to say I'm just starting my shift. Well, have a good one, Kelf. Thanks for stopping by. Herminator's here. How's it going, Herminator? Drew and Dragons. Session 117 tonight for my Theros table. Wow, session 117. Do you guys play every week? Or do you play like a couple times a week? That's pretty awesome. Is it a notable session? Is it like an end game session or like an important or another, just another one in the road? Today seemed kind of rambling. Yeah, that's how I felt about it. I felt like it was rambling. And so I tried to adjust it, but we'll see. You can also kind of tell when videos, like, you can tell if they're maybe a little boring because the average viewer retention rate goes down. And like that video had a much lower retention rate than my videos usually do. So that's kind of a clue. It's like people are clicking away because it's a little boring. But we'll see. Some people really liked it. It's hard to create videos that appeal to everybody. Some people like to sit down and listen to like the conversation, and other people get bored with that. Dirty Socks is here. Hola to you as well. What's up? Not much. Just Tuesday, hanging out on Tuesday, talking about what does it mean to be a GM, follow-up conversation from the lecture this morning. All right, I think we are ready to roll. I'm going to go ahead and get going here. So basically, here's the thing. I wanted to start this lecture series because we have some new people coming in, creating content for the channel. And so there's going to be an influx of kind of like new topics and new people, new conversations going on. And I've already created like 200 and some videos kind of covering more like beginner basics and even kind of slightly more intermediate stuff. So I wanted to work on this. Lecture series to be a little bit more advanced stuff. So hence the Deeper GM Craft, the name of the series, and basically 25 topics because I tried to narrow down what I thought were the most important topics. Awazark is here. How's it going, Awazark? Nagobi's here. How's it going, Kenogi? Knigobi? Nigobi, I'm pretty sure is how you pronounce it. Doing some art. Awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks for stopping by. It's great to have you. Great to see you. Let's see here. Who else we got? I think we caught up on all those comments. Awesome. All right. So anyway, but yeah, the lecture series is intended to go a little bit deeper and to kind of give my contribution to the level deeper on GMcraft. And so I tried to choose the 25 most important topics. Tomorrow's topic is the GM is a storyteller versus facilitator, balancing world building with player agency. That's the topic for tomorrow, and so I hope that it will be good. It's a combination of knight and goby, which is my favorite fish, but goby is fine. Okay, gotcha. Very good. Very good. So yeah, but that's what this lecture came from, and that's why I talked about it this morning, and that's why I'm going to continue this series for the next 24 days, and then we'll see where it lands. We'll see if people like it. You know, I have a feeling it's not going to perform quite as well as my usual stuff because it's not the usual kind of candid, lighthearted, just conversational topics, which seem to be like general GM advice. Conversational topics seems to be the stuff that performs best, but I've created like 200 of those videos roughly, and I wanted to delve into this a little bit deeper, into this more advanced stuff. And I'm actually interested in hearing if people actually find it more advanced and helpful in that sense. I'm kind of interested in that. Sometimes it's a little hard to gauge what advanced means when you're talking about GM craft. But anyway, there is some great conversation in the Discord I'm going to cover real quick. Let's see if I can find the right channel. Shout out to John Haney, who rearranged the Discord, and it is so much easier to get around. However, I am still finding myself at times struggling to navigate with the new labels on things because I got so used to the old labels. Derek says, you could interleave this series with other items. This is true. I could do this. Do you think that would be a good idea? That's a good question. I think you must think that's at least kind of a good idea, hence mentioning it, but I'd be interested in hearing what people think about that. There's a part of me that likes to kind of commit to one thing and stick with it till it's done, so my tendency, my temptation would be to go ahead and do mostly these videos, although it is true that on the weekends I'd probably intersperse other videos anyway, just because the labor curve on creating these lecture videos is actually kind of high, and on the weekends I may not get the full time to do it right. Robert Evans says, to be honest, having deeper thoughts in jamming is good. You can only watch so much of the how to get started type stuff. I agree. And there's a point to where it all kind of gets done. Like, it all has been talked about to quite a lot. And so I'm constantly asking myself, like, what new things can I talk about? Instead of the energy drink today, we got the Burger King Coke going on here. There's caffeine in Coke. That's the upside. The downside is that there's also lots of sugar. This is bad. This is very bad. Anyway, so here are some thoughts from this morning's video. Connor, son of John, in the Discord said this. Unfortunately, I might miss the coffee break. I have a meeting that is done at 1, but we'll see if it ends on time. I think being a GM isn't necessarily about making sure people are having fun. That isn't necessarily to say people shouldn't have fun, but more that the players you have in your game should ideally have fun in the world and story that you are presenting. I don't think it is the responsibility of a GM to break their back making sure everyone else is having fun. I like to run stressful games. Quotable. I like to run stressful games. Players that want to just unwind for a fun time shouldn't play in my games. And my players know that. Connor is a real one. Connor, son of John, you are a real one. I have worlds that act on and react to the party. Worlds where no good deed goes unpunished. That is the kind of world I present to my players, and I hope that is the kind of world they enjoy. I don't think it is a disservice to remove a player who doesn't fit my style from the group, and hopefully that removal is amicable, as they might find fun in another person's game, but not mine. It doesn't mean they are a bad player. Just because they aren't a good fit for my game or that I'm a bad GM because I stuck to my guns and didn't bend the world to fit that player. Okay, so this brings up actually some really good ideas. I kind of want to talk about this for a second. Garrick says if it doesn't draw as much viewership, interleaving might ease the channel impact. Oh, that's true. Mr. Vincent's in the house. Come on, people. 13 watching, only 3 likes. Thank you. Hit that like button. Garrick says, thou shalt have fun or else. Yes. Okay, so Connor, son of John. So there's a couple things I like here. Number one, I do think we're coming to a point in time, especially on virtual, because I have realized that I would say it's relatively easy to find players for virtual games as opposed to finding players for in-person games. I have found that it is pretty easy and chill finding players for virtual game. So with that ease of use, I think comes a really good and interesting avenue where I think actually game masters should be a little pickier about the players they let into their games. It's no longer true that there are like 4 people in your hometown who play D&D and you're tied to those people for the next 6 years. I think that with virtual, we are open to a world where you could honestly really be more free to choose people who play the style you want to play and more. And I kind of think that groups arranging via like what style they want to play is a good thing. And so I think Connor is leaning toward that. And I think that is I think that's a positive thing, to be honest, because why not? Like, it's a little strange to have 2 super casual players and 2 relatively hardcore, dark and gritty players. And then the game master favors a darker, grittier game. But then you have the 2 casual players over here who they're just like miserable and it's terrible and they're probably going to quit anyway. Like, that's a weird situation, I feel like. And I kind of feel like, why change the whole thing, just because, you want to fit those players in? It might be true that those players would have more fun in a casual game. So in that sense, I feel like I kind of agree with Connor in that sense. I'm going to catch up on a couple of these comments here. Gabriella in the In Between podcast says, agreed. Fun is the shared responsibility of the table, in my opinion, anyway. Okay, I agree with you. And I'll also say this, and I don't say this a lot because my channel is specifically for game masters. However, there is a lot of power in the player's hands to have a fun game. And the GM can only do so much. This channel is all about helping GMs, so that's who I'm always talking to. But there are a lot of players out there who actually need, I'm going to say this with all like due respect, there are a lot of players out there who actually need to learn how to play the game and how to have fun playing the game, because there are a lot of players who are their own worst enemy at the gaming table in terms of having fun. And I think that that's true. And I think that game masters would have way more fun if more players kind of like knew how to help themselves have fun at the game table. I think that that is kind of actually a gap. I might create some content about that someday, but it's just that this channel is for GMs. Maybe I'll create that stuff so the GMs can send it to their players. Drew and Dragon says, I think we are facilitators and love emergent storytelling, letting the players make actions that shape the story. I truly don't know what will happen, but know what is in the world and what it's doing. Yeah, no, that sounds like sandbox, letting the characters dive in and create the narrative, which is exactly what I kind of think is the goal. So that sounds awesome. Gobi says, let's see. Oh, I skipped it. Gobi says, maybe hot take, but I think even outside of virtual and modern day, it's harder to find players. But if you're willing to branch out, you aren't stuck to those same 4 players. I live in the middle of the mountains in Bumbleduck nowhere. I have still DM'd for over 35 people in the past 2 years. Facebook local groups reaching out. Bumble BFF. Do people really look for D&D groups on Bumble BFF? That is super interesting. I've never ever heard of that before. Being brave and talking to random people who have nerdy accessories and stuff. It's hard to be brave, but you'd be so surprised how many people are there. That's true. That's true. I mean, if you it's also true that D&D is actually becoming more popular. More and more people are willing to do it. And it's also true that like quote unquote cool people are like more interested in D&D nowadays, whereas it used to be like, you walk in and you look for the game store, and you know that those four nerdy dudes sit in the corner, like they're the ones to approach and ask. No one else will probably be interested. It's not like that now. It's not like that at all. It can be much more trendy, much more fancy. We're getting fancier, everybody. We're getting a lot fancier. How do y'all feel about that? Do you enjoy getting fancier as D&D becomes more mainstream? Dave's Imagination says, it's easy to find players to play D&D with. It's hard to find players you want to play D&D with. That is interesting, and I don't necessarily disagree. Dave, do you feel like you have a hard time finding players you actually want to play with? I guess what I'm asking is, do you feel like the vast majority of players are kind of like what would you call it? They're not attractive applicants to play with? Do you feel like it's kind of rare to find those great players? Let me know what you think about that. Aaron says, hi, how's it going, Aaron? Robert Evans says, not every DM is for every player. I do not like playing in silly games. I agree with you, Robert. I actually don't either, unless it's intended to be that way and it's like for a fun thing. If you are the type of player that wants to rip off a cartoon character, then the table I run is not for you. You have to build the table you want. Do not settle. I kind of agree with you. I one time had a player try to make a clone like Dragon Ball Z character. And in this particular campaign, I made the grave mistake, which I will never make again, of letting people use homebrew classes off of, what's that website where people used to always get their homebrew classes off of? I can't remember what it's called. Was it D&D Wiki? It might have been D&D Wiki, but it was awful. It was awful trying to play a Goku ripoff character. And he even tried to like talk like him, and he named him Goku. Like, oh my goodness. I would call that one of the worst I've ever seen as far as like silliness goes. Let's see here. I lost my place in the comments. Drew and Dragon says, a lot of players have not read enough of the player handbook to even know their options or their class. So Drew and Dragons, you are not wrong. And that's where I kind of think sometimes D&D does have a steep learning curve. It kind of does, because there's like, this is a surprising thing to say, but I feel like there's not an insignificant number of D&D players who want to play D&D, but actually purchasing the book is too extreme for them. Like, they don't want to purchase it. They want to come play, but they don't want to purchase the book. And then number two, sitting down and reading and understanding the class is the equivalent of asking them to do too much work. Like, that's too much work for them. Now, my attitude toward those types of players has always been, I'm fine with those kinds of players. I can like help them with their class and stuff if they're fun to role play with, if they're immersive gamers, if they really get into the story. I'm fine with those kind of players. The worst of the worst is when you have like that kind of player who's also disengaged or also doesn't take it seriously. Then it's like, well, we're wasting our time. We want to tell the story. We want to tell an immersive story. As long as they're into that, I can get by with the not wanting to do all that work kind of part of it. I can live with that. That's just my personal take on that. Gobi says, Bumble BFF is my biggest influx of players. Granted, finding female players in general can be wonky, so that's what drove me there, but absolutely a huge tool of mine. And Home Depot. That's random. The amount of nerds who work at Home Depot is wild. Really? Do you just walk up to people and invite them to your D&D games at Home Depot? That's super interesting. I've never thought about that. I feel like your Home Depots are different than ours. Aaron says, in my opinion, to be a DM basically means you're a god, since you create either most of the world or the entire world. This especially applies if you homebrewed your entire world. So that's an interesting take on it, because there are gods in D&D. I think I would change that. I think I would change it to be more like this whole story is going into a book and you just happen to be the one holding the pen. And then there are independent actors in your book. That's how I would describe it. I think a GM is more like an author. Gobi says, ooh, I don't have the book and have never read it, but I do stupid amounts of research through videos and such. Well, you know, you do mean the player's handbook? That's so interesting. You've been running games for 2 years and you don't own a player's handbook. Do you ever run into trouble? Do you ever run into like rules lawyers trying to rules lawyer you? Dave's imagination says, I can play a one-off with anyone. So what are we talking about? A one-off, a few months, a few years, longer? The people I'm willing to invest my time with changes with the duration of time. That's true. That's very valid. Garrick says, so switch it to a much less complex version. My group did. Garrick, that's the upside of that. Like, I don't disagree with your decision to switch to Basic Fantasy. I think that's what you're playing. Isn't that called Basic Fantasy? I do not disagree with your decision, and that is not a bad choice to make. I just have kind of a magical romantic attachment to D&D. I just love D&D. If it weren't for that, I'm the type of person who would see it advantageous to switch to a simpler system. Gobi says, I can't sit and read anything. I'm too busy body. But just friendly reminder, there's tons of other resources to learn. Never an excuse. No, I agree. If there were ever a time where you could not have to buy a book, now would be the time for sure. Absolutely. Dave's imagination says, my home game has been running 10 years with only minor evolution of players. Sounds like you found a good group. That's awesome. Robert says, I'm late. I was cooking. Robert's here. How's it going, Robert? Robert Evans says, players have to meet the GM in the middle. If they are not ready to commit to the game, then they're not ready to play. Sloan's in the house. How's it going, Sloan? I actually love players with little knowledge of the rules. I feel like they are more likely to try new things. I always say player character, not your sheet. So Sloan, I agree with you, and that tends to be my approach too. Some of my favorite gaming experiences have been with players who had no idea what they were doing. They just dove in, I gave them a sheet, they were happy with it, and they just started role-playing, and I love that. Gobi says, LMAO, yeah, some of my coolest players have been from Home Depot. They can like decorate their vests so you can see their pins and art and figure out where the nerds are without having to dig far. That's awesome. I love that. That's awesome. I guess I would spend enough time at Home Depot, man. Robert says, Aaron, just some eggs and bacon. Eggs and bacon is where it's at. That's where it's at. Drew and Dragons says, then you are not the issue. Haha, you can read it all online, to be honest. It is just the effort level that it is needed to know the game. Our minds are the operating system of the game in a world of video games. Well said, well said. Gobi says, I don't own a player's handbook or DM manual. I have only ever had one player who was an issue because I knew my stuff, but they had an issue with the idea I didn't have the books, but no. Oh, yeah, some people are weird about that, actually. Dave's imagination says, but D&D can mean different things to different people. Do you mean 5e or 2024? Okay, that's a good question, Dave, because you're right about that. When I say I love D&D, I mean the most current version of D&D. I upgrade like a real pop culture snob. I'm a total sellout for D&D. I love D&D. So 2024 stuff, going to be buying it. I bought the Player's Handbook. I have not yet gotten my DMG. I'm looking forward to the Monster Manual. I'm going to get them. I'm still running the 2024 Monster Manual, but I'm going to upgrade as soon as I can. I still have all my 3rd edition books. When 3rd edition was a thing, I loved it, although I was brand new to it. When 4th edition came out, I couldn't afford to upgrade, so I kept playing 3rd edition. But I did like 4th edition, and I played it with one of my friends who did have it, and I loved it, and I thought it was awesome. When 5e came out, I upgraded. When 2024 came out, I upgraded. So that's what I mean when I say I love D&D. I love to play the new version, to be honest. And I'm not mad about it. I think it's cool. I like it. Gobi says, like they were arguing with me in the game, so I had to pull out my phone to Google. And when I was right, they threw a tantrum. It's just expected for me to not know, though, since I didn't have a book. It's so, I think it's inappropriate for a player to argue with the GM. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I was playing my lawful evil bard Minotaur Grom, Zach, and William's game one time, and so Grom has the crafter feat, which one of the interesting benefits of the crafter feat is that you're supposed to get 20% discounts on non-magical merchandise that you buy. And so I was basically trying to make this big deal where Grom was going to buy a whole bunch of wine and then like sell it overseas. And so I asked the GM, hey, can I get my crafter's discount on the wine that I'm buying for this business thing? And he actually made some rolls and he changed it to a 10%. He was like, you can't get a 20 on this, but you can get a 10%. Now, rules as written, maybe I should have gotten the 20 if we're just straight going by the rules. But here's the thing. I don't, by the time you say rules is written, you're already getting on my bad side, I feel like, because the rules are a guideline and the game master is the one who decides. And so like, let's say, for example, that I was frustrated about that and I tried to argue with the GM about it. Like, even me starting that conversation where I disagree with him about it or try to correct him, I feel like all of that is very disrespectful. I feel like players should never do that. If a player feels like the GM isn't aware of a rule and that rule might be important, then they might ask, like, here's how to do it. Hey, GM, it says here, blah, 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 blah. I just wanted to know if that would apply to this situation or if that's not like relevant. And I think that's a respectful question. Whatever the GM answers, you just say, okay, cool, thanks. Because all you need to know is how your character is going to interface with the story. And the GM is the one who decides that. And so anyway, long story short, Gobi, I feel like the player shouldn't have argued with you about that to the point where you had to pull out your phone to prove it. They should never have pushed you to that point. I think that's kind of not very nice. I think it's kind of disrespectful. Players should have more respect than that for their game masters. Aaron says, I like the author thing, to be honest. It might be less self-absorbed than calling myself a deity. Yes. Excuse me. That's funny. Perhaps it's more like you're running a play. Yes, I do. It's also kind of like being a playwright. You write the script, players are the actors. Well, kind of, but they're also writing their own script. It's like an improv play is what it's like. Iskandar the Great made it. How's it going, Iskandar? Gabriella in the End podcast says, one of my first time players is like that does an amazing job of interacting with the environment as the character. This is Bailey, by the way. Oh, hey, Bailey. How's it going? You can just call me Gab on here. Full name is a mouthful. Gotcha. Okay, Gab. I gotcha. You should have heard how long it took me to figure out what Iskandar the Great's name was. I butchered it for like 12 live streams. Anyway, Gab says, I try to hold my players to a standard of tell me what you want to do and we'll see what we can do with the mechanics available to you. Yeah, that's awesome. That's very fair. Herminator says, my course set pre-order just got me the new monster manual on digital today. Heck yeah. Is it awesome? I heard it's awesome. I also heard they dropped orcs from it. Is that true? Orcs are now completely a playable race, not even a monstrous race anymore. What is going on? Aaron says, I still play 5e 2014. It's what I know best. That's okay. There's no hate. People can play, they can play 3e, they can play 2e, they can still be playing AD&D if they want. Like, they don't have to even play the system. Get yourself a notebook and some dice. Make up your own system. That is all fine. There's no hate in the homebrew game. It's about getting together and playing the game with your friends and having a fun time. And for some people, a lot of rule books help that. For some people, having a lot of rule books takes away from that, right? Like Garrick plays with a much simpler basic fantasy system. Works for Garrick's group. I understand it. Sometimes you don't want the rules to get in the way. I used to do super rules light with Star Wars. I thought rules got in the way. They made it clunky. That's how I felt. Gobi says, I won't lie, bickering and arguing with the DM is the fastest way to get kicked from my table. Granted, I do so much for my players and give them so much stuff and adjust things, allowing anything homebrew is actually pretty extreme. That is giving a lot. Work so hard for them. So when someone wants to argue 10 minutes on the physics of the world, I'm like, yeah, you can find a different table, fam. I don't blame you. And I do think that game masters should stand up for themselves because they do a lot of work and they do not deserve to be disrespected. Here's the thing. Game masters, a lot of times there's this emphasis put on make the game fun for your players, but the game has to be fun for you too as a game master. And if your players are playing a silly game and you don't want to do that, if your players are not taking it seriously, if they're not tracking their classes seriously, and this is taking away from the game for you, friends, this is not a good deal. As a game master, just because you're the game master doesn't mean you have to stake yourself on the sacrificial altar of player fun. You should also be having fun. You are also a player. You're just not running a player character. You're running the game. Robert Evans says, raw is a common language between the player and GM. Without it, how are you supposed to plan a play? So Robert, I agree with you. I love to try to stick to the rules and honor them as much as possible. It's just that what I'm trying to say is by the time a player says, rules is written, it's supposed to work like this, as in a corrective statement to the GM, that's when we're starting to go down a bad road, in my opinion. Like that's what I meant by saying that. I have no problem with rules as written, and I like it when players point out rules to me that I might have been unaware of and help me to make better rulings. But there's like a respectful way to do it, and then there's like a disrespectful way to do it. You know, I just feel like that's the difference. Gobi says, we already read that one. Garrick says, so you're really eliminating orcs as monsters? I'm not sure, Garrick. I saw a thumbnail about that on YouTube, and I heard people talk about that. I do not know if that is true, but that's what I heard. And I'm trying to confirm because I haven't seen the new Monster Manual yet. ADHD says, my players don't argue with me on rulings. What we do is I make the ruling and we discuss it after the session and make a ruling for future instances. That is respectful. That's respectful. It's respectful that your players let you make the ruling and then they talk about it later. That's totally fine. Aaron says, I know they removed orcs from the Monster Manual for some reason. Well, they were like humanizing orcs, right? This is a scandal. This is scandal, as the meme says. Very scandalous. The orcs are looking more and more human these days. What happened to the oppressive, dark race of orcs of old? Do we no longer have the monster orcs that used to roam the countryside, feared by humans and elves alike? This is a good question. Aaron says, did they keep goblins? I'm assuming so. I don't think goblins was a part of that. I think it was just the orcs. Dave's Imagination says, the new Monster Manual did drop. It might only be to certain subscribers. I love me some D&D Beyond. I've never yet bought a book on D&D Beyond, but I love D&D Beyond. It makes it so easy to create character sheets. It makes it so easy. Dave's Imaginations says, discipline. We'll wait until this is done to look at the new Monster Manual. Oh, thank you so much. Herminator says, the old stat block for orc is now a non-species specific NPC stat block. I wouldn't say it got removed, just not specifically stat allocated. Any humanoid NPC block can be an orc. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So in other words, orcs are not a monster in the Monster Manual anymore. Herminator says, Dave, Master Tier subscribers. Oh, gotcha. Uh-oh. Confirmed. Dave just checked. No orcs in the Monster Manual. Very scandalous. Let's see here. Goblins are there, is what Dave says. Gobi says, honestly, I love humanizing orcs. It makes their actions and choices so much more horrifying. Oh, interesting. When you humanize them and they make like evil choices, do you mean? Personally, I love the ugliness of humanity in my campaigns, just over monsters being monsters. Interesting take. The ugliness of humanity. That brings up an interesting topic of the nature of humankind and whether it is accurately represented in Dungeons and Dragons. That's actually a really good idea for a topic for a future video. The nature of humanity. Mr. Vincent says, orcs will always be monsters to me. I don't guess I think of orcs actually as monsters. I think of them as like a monstrous species, in the sense of like, in the same way that a bugbear is or a goblin is. And I guess why I call them monster species is because they're not, they're not like human, dwarf, elf, gnome, halfling, right? But I do love to play orcs. I think orcs are fun, playable characters, and I have no issue with that at all. In fact, I think it's fun when players play interesting species that are not usually classically playable species. I think it's super fun. I think it's super cool. I think that tieflings are very similar in that way. Tieflings are cool. I don't know why there's not more, I don't know why. So here's the thing. I think it's less likely that a tiefling would be a playable race than an orc, because to be honest, it kind of seems like orcs are more humanoid than tieflings. Tieflings have the blood of fiends. They are infernal in their lineage. That's a lot more extreme than the orcs, I feel like. I've always thought tieflings were kind of a weird, strange, bizarre, playable race. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. Robert Evans says, agreed, humans are the best monsters. Mark Clement says, Hannibal Lecter. Ah, yes, Hannibal Lecter is definitely one of the most terrible monsters. All right, I'm going to read a couple more of these. Oh, there's only one more comment in the Discord for this. John Haney said, being a GM means you are the creator, at the very least, the curator of the world. The game world is your character. You are just as responsible to have a solid game world and run the game world correctly as players are to have a solid character and play them correctly. So that's John Haney's 2 cents. Shout out to John Haney, who cannot be with us today. He's one of our council members, but he is, I believe, filling in for another teacher. So his usual 1 p.m. lunch break did not line up today. Herminator says, I'll have to do a side-by-side look through 2014 Monster Manual versus 2025 and let you know, GMP. Oh, I would be very interested. I'll be looking at it too, though, when I get one. I just haven't gotten one. I'm going to buy it like physically when it comes out. But anyway, yeah, shabam. All right. With that being said, I believe we're reaching the conclusion of this live stream. Thank you all. Great conversation today. Great thoughts from everyone. Really good follow-up to this morning's lecture. And once again, the lecture that I'm going to release tomorrow is a little more engaging. It's like less lecture-y and more normal video-y, and I think it'll be less boring. So I'll be interested to hear if people like that better. I'm trying not to put people to sleep during during my videos, my what I would call deeper, more advanced roleplay topic videos. Robert says, later, y'all. Thank you, Robert. Thank you all for joining us. It was fun having everyone. I'll be back here tomorrow, 1 p.m. for another Coffee Break Live. I will see all of you then. Have a great day. Roll some D100s for me. Don't forget to drink some caffeine. Stay awake. Don't fall asleep. I got to read Kelf's comment real quick. Kelf says, I recently reviewed a book called Essential NPCs, which is 26 humanoid archetype stat blocks with 13 different CRs for each archetype that grows and evolves as they raise in CR. Oh, interesting. Kelf, I'm gonna have to learn about this from you. That's my plan for getting orcs back in, just using those stat blocks. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, heck yeah, that's cool. Naps are good. Naps are very good. All right.